That is the chutney that makes the dosa here what it is. That very famous Samrat, Chalukya Samrat Kempu chutney. That dosa was pristine in its whiteness, but you will see that when he flips over that dosa, that chutney would have lent its crimson bright hue to that dosa. It's like I'm meeting a long lost friend. Hi folks, this is Kripal, Amanna, Gourmet on the Road, and you're watching Food Lovers TV. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying safe and strong. Well, this episode is a bit of a trip down memory lane. Right behind me is the Taj West End, a place where I used to work many moons ago. And there is a particular food memory that I have that isn't within the West End, but outside the West End. So I used to have an office here, and every once in a while, when I wanted to taste something other than the food that was served here, especially when I longed the dosa, I would crave for a particular dosa. This was a dosa that was served down the road at an eatery called Samrat. The last time I tasted that dosa was perhaps over 2 decades ago. Today we're going to once again savor a taste of that long forgotten Samrat dosa. Well, the old Samrat at Chalukya doesn't exist anymore, having recently ceased operations after running for decades. Instead, what we have is the mini Samrat that is managed by SAMRAT CHALUKYA. And the tagline there says, new place but same taste. Only one way to find out, by stepping into the eatery and trying to refresh my memory of 2 decades ago. Let's go. Namaskara. So I'm with Mr. Santosh Shanbag. So he had reached out to us telling us about mini Samrat, and to be honest, it brought back a memory for me, because many years ago I used to work at the Taj West End, and every once in a while when we longed for a good masala dosa, we would walk down the road, go to Chalukya and enjoy that dosa.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Wonderful. I still remember that Kempu chutney in that dosa. Barboda?
Now, because Chalukya got closed down in September 25th after 47 years.
After 47 years?
Yes.
So your father began...
Maruti Shanbag. So he began that in 1977.
And then the hotel itself shut?
Yeah, hotel itself, the complete hotel itself shut, including the lodging. Now we are presently here.
Okay.
Now, next month we are likely to open in Church Street with a brand name called Chalukya Samrat.
Chalukya Samrat, because I think that's what people remember it as.
No.
Like for example, Namge Sa Havaga, it was about going to Chalukya and having the dosa.
Yes.
Items are still the same.
You can test and see. You only have to certify if
Well,
it's the same or not.
Well, to be honest, I don't quite remember the flavor of what I tasted, but I remember that the Chalukya, the Samrat masala dosa, was quite vivid in its redness, both on the outside and on the inside. There also used to be a dab of butter that was placed carelessly on top of the dosa, and as the waiter carried the dosa, that butter would slither and slide on the surface of the dosa. And then when it got to you, you would then smear a bit of it over the dosa and then relish it with that chutney.
Yeah, even we do it right now here. Neatly, providely, on dosa we put that butter. We don't charge anything extra. So
Wonderful.
We are continuing the same tradition.
Well, it's always nice to connect to a face, especially when you meet somebody for the first time.
We continue the same old things. Whoever had gone to Chalukya and they are asking for something, we are continuing with the same thing.
This is the chutney that I definitely remember. This is Kempu chutney. This is a taste ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದಾ ನಾನು?
Yeah, please.
ರಾಜೇಶ್ ನಿಮ್ದು ಹೆಸರು?
ಶ್ರೀದೇವ್.
ಸೊ ಎಷ್ಟು ವರ್ಷದಿಂದ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ? 30 ವರ್ಷ. You?
10 ವರ್ಷ.
10 साल से है आप इधर. So what is special about this chutney, sir?
जो हमारा लहसुन का फ्लेवर होता है ना, वो होता है. देखिए आप टेस्ट कीजिए.
ಗಮ್ಮಂತೆ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. The flavor of the garlic. Padigi ಮೆಣಸಿನಕಾಯಿ.
ಬ್ಯಾಡಗೆ ಮೆಣಸಿನಕಾಯಿ, ಹುರುಗಡ್ಲೆ.
ಹುರುಗಡ್ಲೆ, some tamarind ಹುಳಿ ಇದೆ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ. और इसमें कोकोनट गिरता है? नहीं गिरता है. So इसमें लहसुन, अनियन जाता है?
अनियन भी नहीं जाता है.
हाँ.
थोड़ा सा अदरक जाता है.
थोड़ा सा अदरक जाता है, जिंजर जाता है और मिर्ची.
वही बैरगे मिर्ची.
सोक करके ग्राइंड करते हो?
ग्राइंड करते हैं.
Wonderful. That chutney सखत पंच है.
The color of dosa is because of this chutney.
Oh, so the chutney from the inside peeps outside.
Yes.
Ah.
Many customers who come here, ತುಂಬಾ ಜನ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ ನಿಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತ್ರ ಏನಕ್ಕೆ 10-15 ನಿಮಿಷ ತೊಗೊಳ್ಳೋದು ಏನು ಸ್ಪೆಷಲ್ ದೋಸೆ ಬೇರೆ ಕಡೆ ಹೋದ್ರೆ 5 ನಿಮಿಷದಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಗೂ ಗಲಾಟೆ ಆಗಿದೆ 5 ನಿಮಿಷದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊಡೋದಿಲ್ಲ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾಪನ್ಸ್ ನೀವು ಅರ್ಧಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇಯಿಸಿದ್ರೆ that smell of chutney will come, raw smell.
Ah, so you want the chutney to cook completely?
Chutney has to cook completely. You can see how they prepare it.
So ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಹಿಟ್ಟಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಿದೆ?
ಚಾವಲ್ ಕಾಟ है.
Oh, dosa rice.
ಇದೆಲ್ಲ ತುಂಬಾ ಸ್ಮೂತ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ದೋಸೆ ಕ್ರಿಸ್ಪಿ ಬರಲ್ಲ, ಗರಿ ತರ ಇರಬೇಕು.
चावल रहता है उसका पाउडर बनाते हैं.
डोसा राइस ಅಂತ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ. ಇದು ನಾವೇ ಗ್ರೈಂಡ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು.
डोसे राइस.
मान लीजिए कि जैसे 1 kg डाले तो 1/4 kg हम उदिन बेले डालेंगे.
अच्छा, तो 1 किलो इसमें 1/4 किलो उद्दिन बेले. So 1:4.
हाँ.
एक और चावल आपने बोला ना, वो पीस के डालते हो, वो कौन सा चावल है?
वो बॉयल चावल आता है.
बॉइल्ड चावल.
It's a boiled rice which we make it as powder.
So ये भी सोक करता है आप?
हाँ.
कितना टाइम सोक करता है?
कम से कम 4 घंटा.
4 घंटा सोक करता है, उसके बाद ग्राइंड करता है, फिर एंड में जब बनाते हो सब मिक्स करके फिर 4-5 घंटा जोड़ते हो. So basically it's a dosa that incorporates the rice and the urad, the uddina bele, in maybe in a 1:4 sort of a ratio. But I think what really makes difference is this chutney here.
Chutney is the specialty.
The chutney is the X factor. That formula I'm sure must be closely held by Santosh and his staff here.
And the thickness of the tawa is we have some particular measurement. It's not a solid tawa. In between there is a vacuum that will retain the color.
That will retain the color of the dosa.
It will not burn the dosa.
Wonderful. Plenty of tuppa that's being slathered on that dosa. That is the chutney that makes the dosa here what it is. That very famous Samrat, Chalukya Samrat Kempu chutney. That dosa was pristine in its whiteness, but you will see that when he flips over that dosa, that chutney would have lent its crimson bright hue to that dosa. That tuppa to dosa, and there's more tuppa going in there, and I guess that tuppa will also help that chutney cook. This is a dosa that cooks over a period of time.
Yes, it takes at least 10 to 15 minutes.
10 to 15 minutes, because they want that chutney to be cooked all the way. So he's literally scraping that dosa with the chutney and also the wet part of the hittu. Whatever is not roasted yet, he scrapes that along with the chutney and then smears it back on, and then of course some more tuppa that's going in. It's almost like, you know how they make the pav bhaji?
Yeah, pav bhaji.
You know, he's literally basically taking all the scraping and flattening it out almost into a very smooth paste. And at this stage, that chutney and that batter, the chutney and the hittu have become one.
Yes.
So there's some potato palya that's going in. I can see plenty of coriander. I can see some jeerige, some lentils in there, some curry leaves, and of course, some tuppa to seal the deal. Some cashew. ये नॉर्मली सब डोसे में जाता है कि हमारे लिए जा रहा है?
घी रोस्ट में जाता
घी रोस्ट में जाता है. That's when, as he flips that dosa, you see the color emerge, and that is the color, that is the signature of Chalukya Samrat. The color of the batter that has been mixed with the chutney and is now making its presence felt in every square centimeter of that dosa. I think this is a very unique preparation style.
Yes.
So where did your father learn this?
He invented it,
He invented it.
and he told me this is how it has to be done. Don't ask me from where did I catch this.
So your father came to Bengaluru in the early 70s, late 60s.
60s. He was working in Kamath group of hotels as a cleaner, supervisor, manager. Then he started his own outlet called Geeta Restaurant in Gandhi Bazaar.
Okay.
Then after that, Mohan Cafe. Then Mr. Chinnaswamy Raju of Chalukya Hotel. He invited him to open a restaurant there. At that time, in 1977, that place was completely isolated. There was no public. Most of the public was happening only in Gandhi Bazaar, Hanmant Nagar. He kade kammi itta. My dad was scared. He decided what business I'll do here. He never even made 10 rupee business at the start. So the owner was gracious enough, Chalukya owner. He said, you don't pay me rent for 6 months. You do it. If it works out, fair enough. If it doesn't work out, then we'll say goodbye. And he did not give up. This chair is almost 30-35 years old. It was in Chalukya kitchen.
So Shanbag Senior would sit on this in the kitchen.
In the kitchen, and he used to manage everything. He never believed in sitting in AC room, AC office room. We always used to sit in kitchen and supervise how things are. That is how Chalukya name came up.
And like they say, the rest is history. A lot of people know Chalukya Hotel thanks to that dosa. So ಇದು ದೋಸೆ ಆವಾಗಿಂದ ಆಯ್ತಾ 77 ಇಂದ?
From 60s ಇಂದ ಇತ್ತು, no one knew about it.
So ಅವಾಗ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಥಳ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ. Fantastic. You know, the good thing about ನಮ್ಮ Bengaluru is ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸಿಕ್ಕಾಪಟ್ಟೆ ದೋಸೆ ಇದೆ. There are many dosas and many iconic dosas at that. Each one special, each one signature in its own style. But here you are, a dosa that goes back to the 60s, which is completely different in its own unique style and identity. And needless to say, I'm looking forward to getting to the table and tasting for myself that Chalukya Samrat. Tuppadu Masal Dosa. Sir, ನಂಗೆ ಒಂದು ನಿಮ್ಮದು ತುಪ್ಪದ ಮಸಾಲೆ ದೋಸೆ ಕೊಡಿ. One badam halwa and one coffee. How much? Of course, there's plenty of other items too that they have on the menu here. Combination of some North Indian, some roti curries, some manchuris and things like that. So there's plenty that people come here to savor through the day. Of course, the masala dosa is a showstopper. Speaking of which, it's found its way to my table. That ghee roast masala dosa with that blob of butter on top, served to you with the sambar and the chutney, a gatti chutney here, and then of course also that badam halwa. That's a masala dosa that feels quite sturdy even as I apply some pressure to it. This isn't a masala dosa that's too fragile. This is a masala dosa that's quite solid, because once they ladle the batter onto the tawa and then they smear the chutney, they let it cook for a few minutes and then they literally scrape that chutney out along with whatever batter, the hittu that it's sticking to, and then they mash it into a fine paste and they smear that all over the dosa once again. They allow it to cook rather patiently, and that's the reason why this is a dosa that feels quite held together, that feels quite gutty, that feels quite solid. And therefore, I remember, if memory serves me right, you had one of these dosas, you were set at least for a couple of hours. Enough lessons from history, let's get to that dosa. That ghee roast masala dosa, that butter has almost sunk into that dosa. Oh, I love the patina of that dosa. This dosa is so strong that you can literally build a house on it. And you need to exert a bit of the pressure. crack through that dosa before it reveals what it's holding within, that palya. It's like I'm meeting a long lost friend. I haven't tasted this dosa for over 2 decades now, but the moment I place it in my mouth, it takes me back to memories from 20 years ago when I would visit Chalukya Samrat with my colleagues, sit in the car and savor this alongside some of the other dishes too. Of course, you have the palya here, but this dosa is flavorful enough to be eaten on its own because all that chutney has merged and become one with the dosa. So you're tasting a bit of that chili warmth, you're tasting a slight punch of the garlic, the warmth of the ginger that goes into it, a little bit of the hunse hannu too. So you're also tasting a bit of the sour notes in that dosa. That I suspect is not a result of over fermentation, but also from that chutney, also from that tamarind that goes into that garlic chutney. That's a dosa that goes crunch, crunch, crunch from the first bite till the last. The potato isn't particularly mousse-like in its texture. It's basically chunks of potato that you see in there. You can spot some onions there, some green chili as well. And because this is a ghee masala dosa, there's also some godambi or cashew gets crested atop that palya before that dosa is folded. And in stark contrast to the vivacious flavors of the chutney, that palya is papa, that palya is well mannered. Let's taste some of the godambi in this bite. There's a bit of sweetness that a bite into the godambi results in. I'm really enjoying this dosa. I'm also liking a bit of the curry leaf that I can taste in that palya there. Let's savor this now with some of that chutney. You can taste more the flavors of the urugadle, a bit of the green chili. I think the chutney here is designed in a manner that it plays a second fiddle to the flavors that are ensconced in that dosa. So they don't want the chutney to be too punchy, too spicy, etc. because all that spice is already gone into that dosa. That dosa crunches like a cracker. I love the structure of that dosa. So this isn't a dosa where you will find concentric circles of thickness and thinness. Of course, towards the edges, it acquires a near translucent honeycomb sort of a structure. But otherwise, the thickness of the dosa is constant through and through. Because every square centimeter of that dosa has been dug up and then once again recomposed with that chutney into a fine, smooth paste. It tuppada dosa cracker ತರ ಅನಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. Have some of this, the edges of the dosa, sip on some coffee, makes it a perfect evening snack. I still remember I would be in my office at the Taj Western. I used to head sales there, and once in a while you'd get a little bored of the food that you were eating there. You would long for a dosa, and we would make the trek or probably hop into one of the cars and find ourselves in the parking lot at Chalukya Samrat. One look at this dosa and it transported me right back to those times. And this dosa was also sometimes a meal replacement. If you didn't have lunch on time, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the evening, you wanted to eat something which was like a snack but also a little substantial, well, this dosa did the job. Taste the dosa and you needed nothing else. Let's taste the dosa now with some sambar. Plenty of onions there. I can see some red chilies too. I can taste the sweetness that comes from some jaggery. A very typical South Canara sambar, fortified with some onions, and I think there's some gourd that goes into it, just to give it a bit of pulpy texture that the masala can be absorbed into. The onions are soft, almost jammy. In different places you would taste the dosa differently. So in some places you want that dosa with the palya and the chutney to make for that complete bite. But here, because most of the flavors are contained within that dosa itself, you can enjoy its taste in different ways. You can taste, for instance, just that dosa by itself because it's got all the complete punchy hit of the chutney. Or you can then taste the dosa with the palya. Takes you in a different direction because the potatoes are mild, gentle, tones down the punch of the chutney a bit. Or if you want a little more oomph, go for that green chutney. And if you want to go into the South Canara direction of things with the sweet lilt of the jaggery and the pulpiness of the onions, well, that's where the sambar comes into play. I'm relishing this dosa. And I love the bright yellow of that palya, courtesy the turmeric. So good. Chutney is there, but I'm finding in this the complete nest that I'm looking for in terms of flavors, in terms of texture, in terms of crunch. And on the inside is a bit of that slightly soft heft. I tasted the chutney just by itself, and there I could taste definitely the rawness of the chili, the garlic, etc. But in this cooked dosa, in this roasted dosa, I'm tasting none of that. So like Mr. Shanbag told me, he said this is a dosa that takes time to roast. So each dosa takes about 10-12 minutes for that process to happen completely, for the chutney to be smeared, for the uprooting of that chutney along with the dosa batter, for it then again to be recomposed into a fine paste, and then they allow it to cook. Cook, of course, with liberal lashings of tuppa, and that takes time. He says we want the chutney to cook completely. When that dosa begins to turn a little brown, that's when they know the dosa is close to being ready. Well, I've cleansed my fingers of all that tuppa, but I think you can still see a bit of gloss. Time to turn our attention to that badam halwa. Idu badam halwa nalli sa. Tuppa horege barta ide. There's some ghee that's oozing out of that badam halwa. And this, I'm told again, is made to a recipe that goes back to the 60s. So out here they say we want to remain true to tradition. So it's basically only the badam and then alongside the khova and the tuppa. I was wondering about the color, but they said no, the color we achieve by infusing saffron into some milk. That is a halwa that is loaded. Loaded, of course, with the almond, but then also plenty of khova, the richness of the milk solids that I can taste in this badam halwa. The crunch of the almonds garnished on top provides a bit of respite. I think this is a badam halwa where you're tasting more the richness of the milk solids and some tuppa, of course. I think when you come here, make plans to savor the tuppa the masala dosa, and if you have a partner, well, share that badam halwa with him or her. And close things nicely with a filter coffee. You can certainly taste the caramel notes of the dark roast and the 20% chicory that goes into this coffee. Well, needless to say, I'm rather happy, rather pleased to be reunited with the Samrat Chalukya tradition. It's a bit sad when you hear of an eatery that's been thriving at one spot for nearly half a century and then are suddenly uprooted to a space that some may say perhaps is a tiny representation of its former glory. But then what's heartening is that the recipes, the dishes that you taste here, like that ghee roast masala dosa, is a sort that harks back to the former glory of Samrat restaurant. It's also one of those dosas that isn't too talked about. It's a dosa that's perhaps more known to the old timers of Bengaluru. So if you haven't discovered the Samrat Chalukya dosa yet, definitely find your way to Mini Samrat and check out a dosa that is very different from most that you have tasted in Namma Uru. I hope you've enjoyed this dosa outing of an episode. Until the next time, take care, stay safe, stay strong, and happy drinking. If you'd like to support the work that we do at Food Lovers TV, do consider joining our membership community on YouTube by hitting the join button below or on the home page. You could pledge a nominal sum and receive special privileges like behind the scenes footage, shoot updates, access to live Q&As and a lot more. You could support us on our Patreon page as well. For more info, check out the links in the description below. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, like, share and leave a comment below. Happy eating!